Sangha doesn't mean just the monastics. Yes, that's the core of it, those who belong to the Ramakrishna order, the monastic order. But the Ramakrishna Sangha includes those who are followers of the tradition. So the Sangha as a movement is very large and includes us all as a family of people who are related through Sri Ramakrishna. And it's a wonderful time in our spiritual life when we come to the point. It doesn't happen automatically usually, but we come to a point in our spiritual life where every member of the movement is dear. All beings should be dear to us, and we want that. We don't want to become exclusive. All members, the whole universe becomes dear. But the members of the Ramakrishna family become dear in a special sense, like your extended family and your immediate family. Again, it's a great joy to be here with you. And I wanted to give an extended guided meditation in this second session, which would have taken up at least half of the session. But that won't leave time to deal properly with the subject. So let us just have a very brief guided meditation. Since I said I would give one, let me fulfill my word. But we'll do just a very, very brief guided meditation, and then I will continue with the subject. So I'll begin with a prayer. Om Ardram Jwalati Jyoti Rahamasmi Jyotir Jwalati Brahma Hamasmi Yo Hamasmi Brahma Hamasmi Ahamasmi Brahma Hamasmi Ahamevaham Mam Juhomi Swaha. Melting into the light, I am the light that shines. The light shines, the light which is Brahman. That which I am is nothing but Brahman. I exist, and I exist as Brahman. I myself offer myself into the infinite light, which is myself. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat. Om peace, peace, peace be unto us all. Let us begin the meditation by taking 3 deep breaths, breathing in deeply, exhaling completely, holding the breath out of the lungs for a moment or two, beginning again, doing that 3 times. Breathe in deeply, exhale completely, hold the lungs empty for a moment, 3 times. And now let us use the breath as a vehicle for sending out thoughts of goodwill towards all beings everywhere, remembering that in the welfare of others lies our own welfare, and that in the ability to establish a deep sense of harmony with all that exists lies the freedom of mind to turn within in meditation. So in order to establish that deep sense of harmony with all beings, let us think as we breathe in that we are filling ourselves with the power of goodwill for all. And as we breathe out, let us think that we are breathing that goodwill out in all directions towards all beings everywhere, with words such as, may all beings everywhere realize what is good. Breathe in goodwill, breathe out, may all beings everywhere realize what is good, and continue in that way. As you breathe, think that you are breathing through every pore of your skin, not just through the nostrils, but through every pore of your skin, like a sponge of respiration. Breathe in goodwill, breathe that goodwill out in all directions. May all beings everywhere realize what is good. Try to feel now a sense of unity pervading everything, a sense of unity which ties you to all of existence, a unity which is the basis of all of our perception, but we never look at it, we never notice it, but it's there as the foundation of all of our perception, a unity pervading all that exists, ourselves and everything else. Try to feel, because you can, with a little effort, you can feel the sense of unity pervading everything. All that we perceive internally and externally, we perceive against this screen of unity, like the screen in a cinema, which allows the light to be projected, which allows us to see the world of the movie. But it's all happening because of the presence of the screen, which ties it all together. So try to feel this unity, which ties all of your perception together, and on the basis of which you perceive everything. Learning to perceive that is the basis for feeling compassion towards all beings. Feeling more than just ordinary compassion, but a sense of unity with all beings. Now let us turn our attention for a few moments to the physical body. Think of each part of the body starting from the toes and working up gradually, part by part, to the top of the head. Picturing each part in the mind's eye as pure, perfect, and full of light, no matter what its actual condition might be. Picture it as pure, perfect, full of light. Go from the toes up to the top of the head gradually, progressively, slowly, and then picture the whole body at once as pure, perfect, full of light. This body, which is pure, perfect, and full of light, is the temple of God in which the holy mantra resides and the form of the chosen ideal, the Ishta Devata. So now let us picture within the heart, the best that we can, the living form of the Ishta Devata, living, conscious, smiling. If you can't visualize it all, just have the sense that the Ishta is there within your heart, the lower center of the chest, the spiritual heart. And if you can visualize a little or visualize well, then visualize the best you can, the living, conscious form of the chosen ideal, smiling and full of grace. And now think that the mantra associated with the chosen ideal, the Ishta Devata, rises as a sacred fountain of sound from the heart of the chosen ideal, rises upward like a sacred fountain of sound and bathes your entire being in its sacred vibration, but originating in the heart of the Ishta. I'll end the meditation by chanting the Gayatri mantra. First, I'll give a simple translation and then chant it one time. May we meditate on the effulgent glory of that splendorous being who has projected the three worlds. May that illuminate our hearts. Om Bhurmuvah Swaha Tatsavitur Varenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yo Na Prachodayat. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu. May all be offered to Sri Ramakrishna. Let me say a few words about visualization before I come back to the topic we were on of ways to practice the mantra. Different teachers in our tradition give different instruction as far as visualization, and so that, of course, you should follow the ways that you have been instructed. Let me just mention some of the ways. The way I gave is the way I was instructed, and many of our gurus instruct to picture the Ishta within the heart, seated and looking in the same direction as we are. The Ishta seated here, looking forward like that, radiant, smiling, living, full of grace. That in the beginning may be hard, and as I said, it may be hard to visualize it all. But if we just begin with the idea, that's enough. And if we can visualize, then so much the better as far as that practice goes. But having the idea, why meditate on the Ishta within the heart? Because when I take credit for doing something. Say I bake a cake, and everyone says, oh, this cake is wonderful, like the cake we had just now at tea time, which was very good. I didn't bake it, but had I baked it, and people said, oh, this cake is good, who baked it? Then I say, I did it. I don't say I did it, and I don't say I did it. I don't say I did it. I say I did it. That's an unconscious recognition that right here is the center of our being. This was recognized in all ancient cultures, not just India. All ancient cultures recognized this as being the seat of the higher mind. Now, we think now that that was because of the absence of science. And so Aristotle famously thought that the brain was a radiator for the blood, just to cool the blood. And of course, we know that that's not true. The brain is here, and thinking processes are here. But this is the manas, not the brain itself, but the manas operates through the brain, the circuitry of the brain. And that is the ordinary mind. But the higher mind, the buddhi, is here. And all ancient cultures recognized that. And this is the center of our psychic being. Our sense of self is right here. So if I picture the chosen ideal in the heart, I'm putting the chosen ideal in place of the ego. I'm unseating the ego by putting the chosen ideal there. And so the chosen ideal, the idea is, with time, with years of practice and so forth, what we want to do is to think that this is the home of the chosen ideal, not Swami Atmarupananda. This is the chosen ideal, which is replaced to the ego. But there are people in our tradition also who meditate here. That's good. Some people find that more effective. And again, this should be in accord with one's teacher's instruction. I'm not giving instruction or giving suggestions of things to experiment with and so forth, but some people meditate here because we feel ourselves often to be between the eyes and the ears. Again, word and form are the two most important sources of higher information. And so we feel ourselves to be in here, at the center of all of the sense organs except for touch, which is all over the body. And so it's easy to think of myself as here, looking here. So some people meditate there for that reason, and also because this is a higher center of consciousness also, and the Kundalini system. Both this and this are higher centers of consciousness. If we meditate here, then we see the Ishta facing us here, and here the Ishta facing in the same direction as us. Some of our teachers, like I had the great blessing of working with Swami Swahananda for many years, who was the head of the work in Southern California, but he had a very large empire, as we used to jokingly say, lovingly jokingly say, because he had centers all across the United States and groups all across the United States that he cultivated. And I had the blessing of helping him in a number of initiations. I was thinking this afternoon, probably more than 30 initiations, people that were initiated. I served as a translator or explainer for him, either people who spoke Spanish and didn't understand English, or people who had a speech handicap that he couldn't understand. So I would sit in the actual initiation as he gave the initiation, as he gave the mantra, as he gave the instructions. He was, so I was very familiar with his process of initiation. So he would tell people to meditate, because many people find it difficult to meditate inside. So he would routinely tell people to meditate on the Ishta as seated on a lotus in front of them, looking at them. So that's another way. Again, I'm not offering alternatives for you, but just these are ways that are often given by our teachers for different reasons. And there is a reason behind each way that is given to meditate. But the visualization is if we can do even a little bit, it's wonderfully powerful. Just as sound has a tremendous effect on the mind, which we can see, even a very gross minded person, a very rough type of person or crude person, If there is beautiful music to their taste, which is played, then it immediately has an effect over them. If it's calming music, it has an immediate calming effect. And even if it's music that we don't like, but it's highly rhythmical, we find ourselves starting to go like this, beating in rhythm to it, because of the power of music over us. And so sound has a tremendous effect over us. Sight also. That's why we go to the countryside. That's why we come to a place like this, Bourne, to the Vedanta Center here in Bourne, because of the beauty of the place. We find coming to a peaceful place like this, which looks peaceful and looks beautiful, which is aesthetically pleasing, it calms the mind. That's why we hang art on the walls, why we hang sacred pictures on the walls, because of the visual effect of form and physical beauty. So both, again, are important. Now, let me return to the mantra and practice. I talked about how we could use the mantra just for concentration, just repeating it. And let me add to that what I said before, that's what most of us have to start with, because our devotion is limited. And even if we can call up some devotion, we can't hold it for long. And we try to do the repetition for longer. And so we end up just repeating the mantra just because I want to repeat it, because I know it will do me good. And so it's basically just holding on to it and trying to concentrate on it. But our concentration is weak, and so we find with time that the practice becomes mechanical. That is to be expected. It doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. It doesn't mean you're doing something wrong. It doesn't mean that the mantra that your guru gave you is worthless. If it was a good mantra, why would it be mechanical? It must be a worthless mantra. No, it's not. This is practically, except in a person who's born a saint like Ramakrishna, it's practically universal, that the practice will become mechanical. That's why Holy Mother used to say, go on practicing whether it's mechanical or not. It doesn't matter whether you jump into the pool or you are pushed into the pool. Either way, you get wet. So being pushed into the pool means not doing it consciously. I don't jump in because I want to, but I'm pushed in. That is mechanical practice. That's pushing you in. You don't feel anything. You even forget what you're doing. It's just om, 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 and you're thinking about other things. That's not where we want to end up. And that's what we work against as we practice. But it's there for all of us, practically all of us, it's there. And so don't be discouraged by that. Know that, as I said before, that it's doing good, even when it's mechanical. It's working, even when it's mechanical. The only danger well, I should say there are two dangers. The main danger in mantra practice is getting discouraged and giving it up and saying, well, I've tried it, it doesn't work. Why should I go on with this? The other danger, I should say, is if we try too hard and we say, as they say in India, to use an Indian English expression, we overheat the brain. That is, we strain too much and we have a reaction from too much strain. And that's a reality also. So don't worry if the practice is mechanical. Again, know that that's not where you want to stay. That you want to, every time you realize that it's mechanical, try to be conscious of what you're doing and try to focus on what you're doing. But it's going to become mechanical again. Don't worry. It's doing something. It's not going to do what it's supposed to do completely until it becomes conscious. But that takes time. That takes a long time. We don't tell people when they come to get initiation that, this is going to take a long time. This is a lifetime process, because then people say, well, lifetime, that's scary. But it's a fact. The spiritual life is for eternity. You're entering something which leads to the timeless, which leads beyond this world, beyond everything that you know, beyond everything that's here, but which is the essence, the reality of everything that is here. You don't lose anything, you gain everything. You lose just the appearance, and you gain the reality, which is the reality of everything that we have here, and you become identified with it. But that is why it's a lifetime process. You can't expect to say Om, 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 Om a few times, a few days, and then you enter into ecstasy. Yes, that happens to someone like Ramakrishna when he was initiated into the Kali mantra so that he could do the puja in Dakshineshwar in 1855 when he first, or it might have been by 1856 when he started worship in the Kali temple. But anyway, the beginning of his life in Dakshineshwar, he was given the Kali mantra by a Brahmin priest, not a great saint, but a Brahmin priest who was a guru. Gave him the Kali mantra, and Sri Ramakrishna immediately entered into ecstasy. That's why he's here, and one of us is not there. So that doesn't happen to us. So get used to the idea that you have to pass through the stage where it keeps becoming mechanical. So again, know that that's not where you want to be, but know that that's inevitable. And so, again, every time you notice that it's mechanical, try to be conscious of what you're doing. So that's why I said that in the beginning, just using it just for concentration, that's almost inevitable for all of us. We're just trying to be conscious of what I'm doing and just trying to bring the mind to it. And that's okay. And that's why I mentioned that first, as the first form of practice, is just trying to get the mind around it. Now, these other forms of practice that two of which I've mentioned and others which I'll mention now, we can do in the beginning also, but we have to deal with this period where the tendency is to always go back just to mechanical practice. Let me add something to that, and that is sometimes even if you have an hour to practice, many people don't have that long to sit to practice because of family responsibilities and work responsibilities. But even if you have an hour or a half an hour to sit and do your meditation practice, you sit and you begin to do japa after some preliminary prayers as you're taught, and then you begin to do japa. And the next thing you know, the half hour or even the hour, the whole hour has passed. And you never thought once about what you were doing. The whole hour passed in just forgetfulness of what you were doing. You were still doing the mantra, still turning the beads if you use beads, but you weren't conscious of what you're doing. Still, you have done something good. That's, again, not what you want, but you haven't lost something. You have done something excellent. You have sat because you know it's important to sit with the intention of meditating. You have reinforced the formation of an important samskara, an important impression, an important habit of sitting for meditation because it's important. Not because I can do it perfectly now, but because one day I will, and I have to start now and do what I can do. And if the whole period goes in forgetfulness and then suddenly I realize, oh my God, the time is up and I have to rush off to work now, you have still done something good. Even at that time, if you were doing your mantra, even unconsciously not paying attention to what you were doing, it was doing something. Not enough for your final illumination, but it was doing something. It was preparing the ground. And you were doing something by making a commitment, I'm going to do this. So it's easy to get discouraged when things like that happen and think, well, I'm just wasting my time. I could have been digging up the garden or carrying out the trash or something else, at least something useful. No, this is extremely useful too. Carrying out the trash we have to do just to be able to live an ordinary, orderly and clean life. But that's not going to take us to the ultimate. It's not going to solve the problems of life. Eventually, this will solve all of the problems of life. It's the ultimate solution to the problems of life. So even if the time passes just in forgetfulness, you've still done something good. So continue to do it. So concentration, and I mentioned purification, and I mentioned identification with higher values and virtues and so forth. Those are ways that we can sometimes use the mantra in those senses, in those interpretations, which help us, and sometimes it helps us to focus a little longer, to think in those ways. It adds some life to the practice. It makes us more conscious of what we're doing. And it works in the sense prescribed also as a purification and as an identification with virtue and cultivation of virtue. We can also use the mantra as a prayer. When I was a new brahmachari in the retreat center of Chicago, which was in the American state of Michigan, a town called Ganges from the 1850s. It had nothing to do with us being there. We went there because it was a town named Ganges, so we thought that's where we should be. So there we had a devotee from Chicago who would come up to stay with us sometimes. And he was a devotee, one of those people who everything he said was funny. He was a wonderful person, a real devotee, American, but one of those people that everything, he couldn't talk without saying something funny. Something enjoyably funny. So one day he arrived and he came up to me and said, you know, I've got a new mantra. And I saw a big smile on his face, so I knew this was something that part of his personality is joking. So I said, no, I didn't hear that. What is it? He said, help, help. So that's actually a very good mantra. And so we can use our mantra like that too. We can use it as a prayer. That is, it can just be a cry to God, a cry to the mother. It can just be a cry for help, a cry for guidance, cry for light, a cry for succor, a cry for comfort, for whatever. The mantra is very effective as a prayer. And so when we feel in that mood to pray, that also will bring the practice to life for some time. Again, everything that we do, there's a limit to how long we can do it until we've developed greater capacity before the mind becomes tired and it stops cooperating. But as long as the mind wants to pray and feels the need to pray, then we can use the japa, the mantra, as a prayer, as a cry for help to God. As one of my teachers, not my guru, but one of my upa-gurus, subsidiary gurus used to say, in spiritual life, we usually begin with prayer because we feel the need for help. We feel insufficient. We feel the need for guidance, for light, for knowledge, for love, for etc. And so we begin with prayer, asking the divine for that which we feel the need of, which we feel lacking within ourselves. But he said that at times that come when we want to worship, we want to give something to God. When we do puja here in any of our centers, when we do puja, we offer flowers to God, as well as other things, but the flowers in the Hindu tradition are one of the main media for offering love, devotion, intention, etc. Why do we offer flowers to God? Is Sri Ramakrishna sitting here saying, why are they not offering flowers to me today? I want some flowers, nobody's bringing me flowers. No, God doesn't need your flowers. We don't offer flowers because God's sitting there waiting for them. We don't offer flowers because God needs them. We offer flowers because we need to offer them. And because God has promised us that he accepts these offerings. As Sri Krishna says, patram phalam, pushpam patram phalam toyam. Whatever you offer to me, whether it's a fruit or a leaf or water, whatever you offer to me with devotion, that I accept the offering given with love by my devotee. That's the promise of God in the form of Sri Krishna in the Gita. And it's the promise that comes through all of the great teachers, the world teachers, that God accepts whatever is given with love. So we offer flowers not because God needs flowers, that he's got a flower project going and he needs our flowers. No, it's because we need to offer the flowers. We need to give something in love. And so that impulse to worship, there are times when we can use the repetition of the mantra as a worship. Each repetition is like offering a flower at the feet of the Ishta seated here. Each time we offer the mantra, it's an offering of worship, it's an offering of praise, it's an offering of love. It's a wonderful way to do the mantra. So these are different ways that we can do, and the same person can use all of these different ways at different times, according to our need and according to our present psychological mood. So pray using the mantra as a prayer, whether it's just a cry for help or whatever. using the mantra as an offering of love, as an offering of devotion, and we can even visualize offering it as a flower and so forth. That's a wonderful way to practice. That also, again, was taught to me by my Upaguru. Another way that it can be used by those who like the path of non-dualism, the path of Advaita, those who are fond of Ramana Maharshi. Ramana Maharshi, he, as I mentioned yesterday, I think it was, he was a great Advaitin, a man, one of those people who is universally recognized as a realized soul. There's some who, the devotees of a certain person say that our guru was illumined, and other people may have doubts. But there's certain people like Ramakrishna, Ramana Maharshi, that nobody has doubt. He was an illumined soul. His path was Advaita, non-dualism, self-inquiry. People would come to him and ask him questions, and typically he would respond when someone, whatever the question was, he would say, "Who are you that's asking the question?" And so at first it looks a little boring. No matter what you ask, he turns it back on you and says, "Who are you that's asking? Inquire into that." But it was a very effective means for turning the people back on seeking the source of the self, seeking who am I really? What is what is the essence of my being? Because that is the reality itself. But this same Ramana Maharshi, he spoke beautifully about Japa. If you read a book like, gosh, I always forget the name of this particular book. It's my favorite book of Ramana Maharshi, but it's done by David Godman, and it's the teachings of Ramana Maharshi divided into subject. And there's a whole chapter on Japa. And so Ramana Maharshi says that one can practice Japa as self-inquiry also. That is, while doing, and this would only be done by one who wanted to integrate it into non-dualistic practice. But thinking that the mantra comes from the reality itself. The source of everything is the reality itself, and the mantra is that reality itself, and it manifests in us in the form of human speech, as we hear it from the Guru, coming from the reality itself. So as I recite the mantra, I can look into the mantra and try to seek its source. From where does the mantra come? It comes from the Ishta, who is the reality itself, who is the Atman and who is Brahman. So the mantra can even be used for self-inquiry. From where is the mantra coming, as I repeat it? From where does it come? It's coming from the source of reality itself. So let me trace it back to its source. These are some of the ways that the mantra can be used. Another way is the mantra can be used to seek our own identity. Or no, let me put it a different way, because that sounds like what I just said about self-inquiry. We can also use the mantra as a means of identification with God. That is, this may be a more advanced practice, but for those who like it and understand it, it's a wonderful practice to think that the mantra is being reality itself. Everything is the mantra. And so as I recite the mantra, I'm trying to become the mantra. Let my body be absorbed in the mantra. Let the body dissolve into the mantra. Let my mind and my thoughts dissolve into the mantra. All of the crazy thoughts coming up in the head, let them all just dissolve into the mantra. Let there be nothing, let the whole world around me dissolve into the mantra. Let there be nothing but the mantra. And so to recite it in this way as a practice, eventually, of course, we want it to become a realization, but we're in the stage of practice. So let me recite it as a way of dissolving everything into the mantra, which is the divine being itself. And to think that all is the mantra, and that nothing in the world matters but that. That's a dangerous thought at first, if we're not ready for it. So let me warn you that this isn't something to begin with, because if we think that nothing matters in the world except for the mantra, then why should I go to work? Why should I take care of my kids? Why should I take a bath every day? Why should I mow the lawn? and it takes the motivation out of life itself. That's not what is meant by this, and that's not what's wanted. That's why it's a practice at a more advanced stage, where we can understand it and still do the things we need to do in life, where it doesn't take the motivation away from life, but it takes the fear out of everything, because I know that I go through the motions that I have to go through in order to lead a life as a human being. I have to eat, I have to sleep, I have to clothe myself, I have to take care of my responsibilities. All of that I do. But that's not why I'm here. I'm here to realize the ultimate truth. None of that ultimately matters. What matters is this. This is the only thing that matters. When that idea goes deep within us, then suddenly everything else is relativized. I can handle it because it doesn't really matter that much. Yes, I have to do things. I have to do it. Yes, these are my responsibilities. I do them, but they don't matter that much. You all know what pop psychology is. And I don't use the word in a derogatory sense, but pop psychology means popular psychology, little tools to help people keep themselves sane, little ideas that you can take up on your own. You don't have to go to a psychoanalyst or something to learn them, just little ideas that you get on YouTube or in a book or whatever that help you along. So there's a wonderful pop psychology idea that was developed and talked about a lot a number of years ago, called the 100-year rule. The 100-year rule means whenever you are worried about something, ask yourself, in 100 years, will anybody give a damn about this? No, they won't. Nobody's going to wonder whether you passed the examination or didn't. That doesn't mean that you don't study for the exam. It just means that I'll study for it and I'll do the best I can. But what will happen, and it doesn't matter. In the large scheme of things, it doesn't matter. So it takes the fear out of life, because you realize that nothing else matters but this. Everything else, it seems so important right now, but tomorrow it's already gone and nobody remembers. We do something stupid and we think everybody saw me do something stupid, and a year later I'm still thinking, oh, everybody remembers that stupid thing I did. No, everybody's looking at themselves and wondering what everybody's thinking about them. People have hardly even noticed you when you did it. So all of those things are unimportant. So again, remembering that the mantra is the only thing that matters. In time, when we can do it maturely, that's a wonderful thing. Think of that as, that is reality itself. Let everything be dissolved into that. Let me disappear into the mantra. But disappearing into the mantra doesn't mean that there's no me. It means that the me has become the mantra. The me has become the mantra, which is reality itself. So using it as a tool for identity, identity. One of the main ways that we use the mantra, and that it's meant to be used, is as a tool for seeing the deity. We recite the name of Sri Ramakrishna and hope that he comes alive for us, that he comes alive, that we see the living Sri Ramakrishna. And people have seen the living Sri Ramakrishna now. And so we recite the mantra hoping that one day, through my practice and through my devotion, may I see the living Sri Ramakrishna, or the living Holy Mother, or the living Vivekananda. So that is a principal way of using the mantra to awaken us to the living presence of the divine being. I've just been reading a brand new book that has come out, The Life of Sister Devamata, Laura Glenn, an American woman who knew Swami Vivekananda, listened to his talks in New York City. Then she was a student of Swami Abhedananda. Eventually, she was initiated by Swami Paramananda and lived the rest of her life as a disciple and a worker with Swami Paramananda, who was a direct disciple of Vivekananda in America. A beautiful life of this woman who came to Vedanta when she was around 40. I forget whether it's the late 30s, in her late 30s or early 40s. But a beautiful book that tells about her visions, among other things. It tells about the visions she had of Sri Ramakrishna. and how from the first vision she had of Sri Ramakrishna, the living, loving face which she could never forget, and how that guided the rest of her life. Oftentimes when we first come, unless Sri Ramakrishna is part of our background, as it is for many Bengalis, because Sri Ramakrishna is everywhere in Bengal, but otherwise, when we come, we see the picture of Sri Ramakrishna, the usual picture like this, it looks a little strange. This man with a absent look on his face, and bent over a little bit, and looks like he's not really there. He looks strange. But with time, we come to see that picture as the image of beauty itself, the perfection of beauty. And so Laura Glynn saw that when Sri Ramakrishna appeared to her, and for the rest of her life. And whenever she saw Sri Ramakrishna, he was to her the living presence and the ideal of beauty, the ideal of love, the ideal of all accepting, compassionate love, all tenderness. And so we recite the mantra to awaken that. So that the Ishta becomes a reality to us. And we can use the mantra as an end in itself, because as I said, the mantra is the reality itself. And everything can just become focused on the mantra itself. The mantra is everything to us if we take that attitude towards it. The mantra is no longer a tool for something, but the mantra is that which I am seeking. And so all of my attention is focused just on the mantra itself, awakening the mantra, absorbing myself in the mantra. So becoming japa. Ramana Maharshi says something which makes no logical sense, but it makes spiritual sense, that the nature of the self is japa. And so when we become identified with japa, then we have realized the self. Again, that's not a logical statement. That's the statement of his experience. So time is almost up. I'll just mention one last thing, and then I'll open for questions. And that is the traditional levels of speech, because I could give a whole talk on this or a whole retreat on this. So I'm just going to give you the essence of it now. It's not necessary to know to practice japa, but it can be helpful to those who are somewhat philosophically minded and like to understand the whys and hows of things. The levels of speech as analyzed by the Sanskrit grammarians, and which was taken into Tantra, which was argued against by Shankaracharya. And one of the dangers of great philosophers like Shankaracharya, not something that they did consciously wrong, certainly not, but the power of Shankara was so great that when he was trying to establish the supremacy of Vedanta as a philosophy, there was a time in India where Buddhism was ascendant but corrupting, and Hinduism was in disarray. And so he was trying to establish the supremacy of the Vedanta, and so he argued against other schools. And he argued so successfully against some schools that those schools disappeared, like the Spotavada, the idea which I'm going to talk to you about now for just a couple of minutes. Swami Vivekananda has revived that idea in his Bhakti Yoga, and his beautiful passage in Bhakti Yoga on Om and the mantra, where he brings in the idea of the spota, reviving that idea, which the idea is that I'm using right now the speech, which you don't need to know the Sanskrit terms, but I'll use them because it helps me to think, because it's the way I learned it, and to what I think of. It's called Vaikari. That is voiced speech, physical speech, made by the physical organs that we hear with the physical ear. So that is the grossest level of speech, but that's the level of speech we use to communicate with each other. So that's one level. There's a level higher than that, which is mental speech called madhyama, which means the middle. It's middle between physical speech and the spota. So madhyama. Mental speech, we don't often distinguish it from physical speech. We think of them as the mental speech as sort of an echo of the physical speech. No, actually, physical speech is an echo of mental speech. Mental speech is primary. We get physical speech because there is mental speech, and we try to express it and communicate it by changing it into sound waves. But in the mind, that's a different level of speech, and we're not conscious of that difference in the levels because the two are so mixed together in our experience that we experience them as one level with the two aspects. In fact, modern physiological studies have found that when we're thinking, we're not speaking, we're not even thinking about speaking, we're just thinking, that there are subtle movements going on in the physical organs that produce speech. We don't feel them, we're not mouthing the words, we think that our mouth is closed and our tongue is steady, but there's subtle movements going on, nervous impulses and very subtle muscular movements going on, reflecting the mental speech. That's because the two are tied intricately together now. But through the practice of the mantra, a time comes, and this is a high stage in the Japa practice, when the mental speech is separated from the physical speech, when the repetition of the mantra is purely mental, and it has nothing to do with the physical organs. That's why it's easier to repeat the mantra by moving the mouth a little bit. We're told to repeat the mantra internally, and we should, not to say it out loud, but to repeat it internally. But even to do that, it's easier if the tongue moves a little bit, maybe the lips move a little bit. It's much easier because the two forms of speech are intimately tied together right now. But a time comes when we can untie the two, and the mental speech is a different level of speech, experienced as a completely different level from the physical. But that comes from the higher level called Pashyanti, that which is seen. When Swami Vivekananda in Almora had the vision of the microcosm and the macrocosm, which later he gave lectures on in the West, what kind of a vision was it? Did he see all kinds of things happening like Arjuna's wonderful Vishwarupa Darshana, the first universal form of Lord Krishna? No, it wasn't like that, at least as it seems from what we have. He had been possessed of this question: what is the relationship between the microcosm and the macrocosm, the vast and the individual? What is the relationship between them? Suddenly, in a flash of insight, he understood the whole secret. And perhaps it took years to explain all that he had understood in that one moment. That's the type of vision in which the meaning whole is revealed not through words. He didn't hear Sri Ramakrishna's voice saying, well, you see, Narayan, the microcosm is like this, and the macrocosm is like this, and this is reflected in that, and you see it works like this. No. In one moment, the whole secret of the universe was revealed to him as far as the microcosm and macrocosm was revealed. That's the spota, the meaning whole. We use words in order to express a meaning whole, but we're not conscious of the meaning whole. But the repetition of the mantra takes us up to there where the mantra is perceived as an integral whole, where the mantra is the idea itself. Before it comes into mental speech and physical speech. And then there's the last level of speech, the absolute vak, the Shabda Brahma, or the highest level of speech, which is Brahman itself, which is actually beyond speech, but which speech is the manifester of. That's why Shankaracharya says in his beautiful hymn, Pratar Bhajami, the morning hymn of remembrance. If I can remember that second verse now. Pratar Bhajami manaso vachasamagam vacho vibhandi nikila yadanugrahena yanneti neti vachanair nigama vochu standeva deva majamachyutamahoragryam. Pratar bhajami manaso vachasamagam. At dawn I worship that which is beyond mind and speech, but by whose grace all words are made manifest. One of the beautiful things in the Vedanta Hindu tradition is, which distinguishes Vedanta from Buddhism. And I love Buddhism. I've studied a lot of Buddhism. I taught Mahayana Buddhist philosophy at the training center for the third-year students for several years in India several years ago. So this is not a criticism of the Buddhism, but it is a distinction, and an important distinction for us, that is a wonderful thing about Hinduism is that it recognizes that everything is a manifestation of the reality. That words, yes, Vedanta agrees with Buddhism that words are not the reality, that we have to go beyond words and speech. And that's what Shankaracharya says, that I worship that which is beyond mind and speech. But words come from there. Words come from there. Everything here, human beings, dogs, cats, mice, buildings, everything is a manifestation of that. And we can see through the manifest, we can go back to the unmanifest. And so through word itself, we can go back to the unmanifest. We can get back to Brahman because words come from there through this process of the paravak, the supreme speech, which comes into pashyanti, the idea whole. In fact, Om is the ultimate spota. The meaning of everything is Om. That's the whole. Everything is Om. And out of that comes this universe. Everything here is a piece of Om, as it were. And so we go through the pashyanti to the paravak. Vaikari madhyama pashyanti vak. And the mantra leads us through these levels up to the supreme. So I want to leave time for question and answer. So again, that's a big topic, and I don't want to get lost in it. So let me stop here and open for questions. Yes, Julie.
When we are told to guard our speech, is that at a gross physical level and mental both?
Yes. So the question is, when we are told that we have to guard our speech, is that meant at the physical and the mental level both? Yes, certainly at both. It's easier to guard the physical speech, though for some people it's very hard. but it's easier to guard that than the mental speech. But we have to learn to control both. Yes, that is, Holy Mother used to be very particular about this. The Buddha was very particular about it also. The Buddha always emphasized the importance of proper speech and not using words to hurt others. And so Holy Mother was very particular. She would say that one word can destroy a family. Or some other human relationship or undertaking. One word can, said at the wrong time with the wrong attitude or whatever, can destroy a family. So be careful what you say. So guard your speech. The mantra helps a great deal in that, because eventually, again, all of these things, it helps a great deal with that eventually, not when you first get initiation, not the first year that you practice, but eventually it helps because with time, you realize that impulse to express myself, that what's so important about that? Why do I need to express myself all of the time? Yes, it's a natural human need. And if people are denied that, then people go crazy. So yes, it's a natural human need. But in time, we begin to see that there are not so many things I need to say. And I don't always need to throw my opinion out there to everybody. And so it becomes easier to guard oneself because I have this inner speech going on, om, 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 going on within me. So guarding physical speech, not saying things without thinking, and then guarding mental speech, that is at a higher stage where we realize that I not only shouldn't say things that are harmful, but I shouldn't think things that are harmful to others also. I should be careful how I think about others as well, because physical speech is just a manifestation of mental speech, and I can harm people mentally as well as through physical speech. So be careful of our speech. Yes. Okay. Yes. So the question is that if one can't repeat a whole long phrase or something, how should Om be pronounced? If that's all that we can say as a mantra, or if that is given as the mantra, just Om, how should it be said? Now, let me explain that the different people will give different answers. They say in the Jewish tradition, I'm not Jewish by background, but I've known many Jewish rabbis and worked with many rabbis, spiritual rabbis, those who teach mystical Judaism. And it's often said by rabbis that if you ask 3 rabbis the same question, you'll get at least 4 answers. And so if you ask 3 swamis the same question, you're liable to get 4 or 5 answers also. So let me give my answer. What I've understood from great swamis, one of whom at least told me about his experience and in the detail, and what I've gathered over the years from my understanding and practice. Oftentimes you'll see Om spelled O-M and also as A-U-M. But the A-U-M is not the correct transliteration of Om. It's used for a specific reason, a good reason, A-U-M. But that does not mean that Om is to be pronounced as Aum, like that. But Om, O in Sanskrit, is a diphthong. It's a combination of the sounds A plus U. If you get the letters A plus U coming together in a Sanskrit word, or 2 words coming together without a visarga or anything else in between, the A and the U become O. And so Om is often used in the meditations in the Upanishads and other places as the 3 matra, as the 3 different sounds that are produced in the word Om. Is used to symbolize one part of it, U another, or one aspect of reality, U is another aspect, and Ma as another. And sometimes the silence after Om is another, the 4th, like the 4 states of consciousness, actually 3 states plus the absolute. The waking state, the dream state, U, the deep sleep state, and the Turiya, which is not a state, but the reality beyond all states, is the silence after Om. And so Om is not Aum, but there are those who emphasize that the 3 sounds making up Om should be evident in the repetition. So there are some swamis, or some teachers, I should say, whether swamis or not, who will insist that Om is just Om, Om, like that. That's all it is. You don't make any distinctions. It's just Om. But I have heard from great swamis that some other great swamis that no, as you recite it, one way of meditating on it, this is not the exclusive way, only way that one should do it, but that a way that some teach to do it is that you should think that the sound starts deep within you and comes up like so. And as Swamiji said, Om represents the whole spectrum of sound production in essence. Vyanjanas, consonants, are called stops because they stop the breath. So you use the tongue to interrupt the breath at different points within the mouth to make different consonants. But the actual essence of sound, you can't pronounce a consonant by itself. You have to have a vowel, a shakti, to make the consonant manifest. And so the vowels are considered the essence of the language, the pure essence of it, and consonants are that which break up the sound coming through the mouth. So as Swamiji explains, you begin in the back of the throat with a. What does Sri Krishna say in the Gita as far as his identification with the alphabet? He says, among letters, I am akarosmi. I am akara. I am the a. Why does he say I'm the a? Because it's the most undifferentiated of sounds. When I'm speaking and I'm doing as I just did, trying to think of what to say, I think, well, what I wanted to say was, I'm forgetting, I just open my mouth and make an undifferentiated sound. So Krishna says, among the letters of the alphabet, all of the letters, I am a, because you open your mouth without any distinguishing effort and just make a sound, it comes out like that. And of course, in the Sanskrit writing, is inherent in every letter, unless you use the halanta, which takes out the vyanjanas, the consonants. It takes out it makes it end in a consonant rather than the but otherwise is inherent in every consonant sound in Sanskrit. So is the most undifferentiated sound. So you begin with that. And as Swamiji says in Bhakti Yoga, it represents the rolling forward of sound within the mouth. And is the last sound that we can make. You can't make a sound starting out here. The last sound you can make is So you begin like that. So if you want to meditate on Om in a way that it has symbolic resonance and symbolic meaning, you should emphasize that it begins way back here and it rolls forward and it closes here, instead of just Om, Om. No, that has no symbolic significance. It's Om, Om, like that. Not Aum, but Om, Om, Om. You begin with Om. Don't begin with ah. So like in some languages, like in French, they have a very hard time saying In French, if you ask them to say they say ah. And I say, no, ah. No, So not making fun of the French, all of us in English, we have certain sounds we can't make also. But not ah, not aum, but oh. Just think of what Swami Vivekananda says, that you start in the back of the throat with the undifferentiated and then the rolling forward, so oh. If what? Yes. Then the same thing. You just think of it as that sound. Everything internally, once you can do it internally, is more powerful. Yes. So yes, you had a question next, and then I'll come back over to you.
We also told about bhava that we have towards Ishta.
Yes.
What's the significance of that?
Yes, bhava means an emotional mood, a direction to the emotions. And so bhava can just mean love and attraction towards the Ishta, or it can mean one of the particular bhavas, like madhura bhava, vatsalya bhava, etc. So that means a relationship, to consider my relationship with the Ishta. So that's something that comes with time. Some people may, from the beginning, have a natural attraction to a particular bhava. Like I know people, including Westerners and Indians, who from the beginning of their spiritual life, they know that God is to me is mother, or God to me is my friend, or something like that. For many of us, it doesn't come so automatically, where we immediately know that this is the relationship I want. So many of us just start with what is called the Shanta Bhava, which just means I just want to realize God. I want to have love for God. I want to approach God, and I just want to realize God. That's enough. And in time, that will probably mature into, if it needs to, it will probably mature into a more recognizable bhava. It doesn't have to, but it often does, where through that you come to the point where you feel a living relationship with God developing, and you realize that God is my mother, or God is my father, God is my child. I'm the mother of Holy Mother. Like that, there are people who have actually practiced that I'm the mother of Holy Mother. She's my baby, and I take care of her. And so a natural relationship like that comes. So bhava is important, but we shouldn't give undue emphasis to it, because it may only come with time. And so it's enough just to feel that I want to realize God, I love God, or I want to love God. Most of us begin, I want to love God, not that I actually do, but I want to, and that's enough. Yes. And then I'll come back there.
In the lectures, you talked about mantra as a whole. But at this point, in my understanding and experience, I see the mantra, the initiation, as a part of mantras. And how do I move from the seeing the mantra as parts of mantras to the whole?
Oh, how do I, now let me see, I'm not sure I understand. How do I move from seeing the mantra as a part to the,
Parts of mantras.
from different parts of the mantra, that there's Om and the Bija and the, that's a very good point. That's a very good point. And I wish I had brought it with me, quotation from Al-Ghazali. Al-Ghazali was a great Sufi mystic who spoke about repeating the name of Allah. But he gives the whole, the essence of Japa practice in this. It's quoted in Meditation and Spiritual Life by Swami Atmarupananda. And I don't have it with me, but it's the same thing was said by Bhartrihari, the great proponent of the Vyakarana philosophy, the philosophy of Sanskrit grammar, as a spiritual path. Here, Bhartrihari says that like the person who was searching in straw for little rocks and things or pieces of coal to use, and who suddenly finds what he thought was a piece of a little stone or something, but it's actually a precious jewel. So in examining language, we examine words and try to figure out how they work. And suddenly we find the priceless jewel of enlightenment there in the midst of words. And then he goes on to explain, it's not in the same passage, but he goes on to explain in the same way that Al-Ghazali explains the repetition of the name Allah, where one begins to just recite Allah, Allah, Allah with the mouth. And then he says, a point comes where the sound begins to rise from the tongue without any effort. And then the tongue stops, and just the sound Allah, Allah continues in the mind, but all movement in the body stops. And he says one has to make effort at that time to stop all movement in the mouth, and only Allah, Allah, the sound keeps rising in the mind spontaneously. And he says, then what one has to do is to, and again, Bhartrihari says the same process, in other words. Then what one has to do is to get rid of the form and the separate sounds of the mantra, and just the inner essence as a whole, the inner essence of the whole. When you get to that, you've come to the spota, the meaning whole, which is what speech represents through the sounds of the alphabet, but which itself is beyond the sounds of the alphabet. So that's a very high level of japa. If you've reached that, the mantra is not only awakened, but you're coming to the essence of the mantra. So Al-Ghazali says that when that happens, when you come to the whole, and there's just a solid, undifferentiated whole to the name of Allah, then just wait at the gate until the door opens from the other side, and one will receive the illumination from the other side. So that's a very high level, but that's, yes, it's where we want to go. And if we get to that, then we just hold on to that, absorb ourselves in that until it reveals the ultimate. Because the ultimate cannot be revealed from our side. The ego can't do that, because the ego is finite. The ego cannot reveal the infinite. The ego, time comes in spiritual life, whether you're on the path of non-dualism or the path of devotion or Raja Yoga, whatever. The time comes where we've done all that we can do. Then we can only wait. And the light has to come from the other side. The opening, that's why the Katha Upanishad says that the self reveals itself to the one that the self chooses. I don't choose to reveal the self has to reveal itself to me. Even if I am practicing non-dual, thinking that I am the self, it's still who I really am that has to reveal itself to me. The ego can't do that. And so with the mantra also. So with all practice, we go to where we can go to, and there we sit and wait. until the door is opened from the other side. That's why in a book like the Avadhuta Gita, which is pure non-dualism, after the first verse, the first half of the first verse, there's no mention of God. It's just, I am the reality, that everything exists within me. But it begins, Ishwaranugrahadeva pumsam advaita vasana. Only through the grace of God does one have the desire for Advaita. Only through the grace of God does one have the desire for Advaita. And then there's no more mention of God. But that starts with from the grace of God. Oh, there were some hands back there. I see that one, and then there's one over here, yes. There is that idea. There is the idea, it's associated with the Kundalini and so forth, that the word begins down here. In fact, this Swami who told me about the awakening of Om, and then later about other mantras that were awakened within his consciousness, he said that the sound comes from the heart, or actually he said it comes from lower than that. It comes from deep within and comes up. So yes, there's truth to that. But my advice on that is not to get caught up in the physiological aspect, because when that happens, the body practically disappears. So the physical part of it is not really important. When that happens, we're practically not aware of the body. So so don't worry about how deep it comes. But yes, you can think of the sound as coming from deep within you and rising. That's a helpful thought. But don't try to associate it with the navel or some other physiological spot. Just the idea of deep within it comes. Yes. What is the relevance of Gayatri? Yes. So the question is the significance of Gayatri, and the second part of the question is he's been told that monks do not use Gayatri. So yes, that's true. So let me start with the first part. Gayatri is a mantra, but it's not a tantric mantra. Of course, it's Vedic, and it's not in the form. It's not in the form of a bija mantra identified with a particular deity. Even though Gayatri became deified into Gayatri Devi, Ma Gayatri, but that's a personification of the mantra itself. But the Gayatri mantra itself is a prayer. And my Upaguru, he told me many times that all of his spiritual awakening came through the repetition of the Gayatri mantra. That is an extremely powerful and wonderful prayer. It's for the awakening of the D, awakening of the Buddhi, the awakening of spiritual intelligence. That may my heart be illumined, may my D be illumined. The reason why monks are not supposed to recite the Gayatri, except for the benefit of others, like I recite it in the meditation and so forth, I am not supposed to say it for my practice. But when there are others that I'm leading in practice, I can say it for their benefit. That's not forbidden. But for me to practice the Gayatri as my prayer, the reason for that is that ideally, not in practice most of the time, but ideally, a sannyasi has come to the state where the D has already been illumined. And then they're going from the individual D to the universal, to the, in fact, there is a mantra given to sannyasis, which I won't say, but the essence of it is that I know the individual self, the Jivatman, now I seek the Supreme Self. So now Gayatri has brought me here, to where I know the awakened D, the awakened Buddhi. Now I seek the Supreme Self. So for that reason, the sannyasi is not to use the Gayatri as a prayer for himself or herself. Yes.
How do I impart the significance of or meditation to the family?
Very good question. The question is, as a householder, as a parent, how do I impart the importance of japa to the family members? That's very good. The best way that you can do it is by doing japa yourself and doing it as regularly as you can. Your life responsibilities allow you to. Swami Ashokananda, again, a great Swami that I never met. He died just at the time when I joined the order in Chicago. I still remember 2 weeks after I had come to the Chicago Center, the head Swami in Chicago traveled to San Francisco for the memorial service of Swami Ashokananda. But a great, great Swami, illumined Swami. He used to say that one of his most wonderful memories from childhood was seeing his parents in their devotions. So children often may not say something, may not show any recognition, but what they see goes deep inside and it makes a deep impression. And so it may not show an effect in childhood or even early youth, but in time that will come out. The fact that they saw Dad devotedly doing his meditation, doing his japa, that's one of the best memories that they can have. Don't worry about its immediate effect, because it probably won't have an immediate effect. Part of the growing up process is showing that I don't care what Dad is doing. So wait until they're beyond that stage, and then it will begin to tell. And of course, it has subtle effects also. It has subtle effects just because you're doing it. It is affecting the others by the act of doing it. Also is helping others in the household. But as far as conscious effort, the main thing is to do it and to let the family members know that you are doing it. That is, don't wait till everybody is asleep and then do it secretly and nobody knows that you're doing it. That, of course, is very sattvic, but it's good for the children to have the sight of you going into the shrine and sitting devotedly and doing it. And that's all you need to do, really. Yes, that's true. That, of course, is true. That you have to do. And so when that you have to do the best that you can. You can't. None of us have ideal circumstances. Even in a monastery, you don't have ideal circumstances. You have to do the best you can. So this is general advice, and within the general advice, do what's possible. Yeah. Yes. Now, do you mind coming close so I can hear? Because my hearing, I'm an old man, so my hearing's not so. No, come close. Come right up here. Yes, don't be afraid. Come.
You said when you're looking at something or hearing something, you absorb knowledge. What if you don't have any of those, like you can't hear or you can't see?
Oh, for people like who are blind and deaf. Yes, that's a very good question. So I had said for the distance audience, the question is that I'd said that we absorb knowledge through seeing and through hearing. And at the time when I said that, I thought about blind people and deaf people. What about them? But I didn't want to make too much of a discussion of it. But it's a good question, because I realized at the time that was a question I was leaving unanswered. So what about people who are deaf and blind? People who are both deaf and blind, like Helen Keller. No one who has consciousness is deprived of knowledge, even if they're deaf and blind. So yes, Helen Keller, as an example, an American woman who was deaf and blind from Alabama from birth. And so when she was a girl, I forget at what age, 7 or 8 or something like that, she would go into rages. She couldn't express herself. She couldn't speak because she couldn't hear, so she never learned to speak. She couldn't express, nor could anyone express to her. All she could do was to feel. And so she's growing up in complete darkness, not knowing anything. And so she would act out throwing things and breaking things just because all she could do was this. But her parents were very wise. Her parents were unusual parents, and they thought that there's an intelligent being inside this girl, but she doesn't know how to access the world because the eyes and ears are closed to her, and she can't speak because she can't hear, so she can't learn to speak. So she got a woman who was unusually sensitive and decided to work with this girl and tried to connect with her, tried to communicate with her through touch. And gradually they developed a sympathetic relationship where the woman taught her things first through feel, to distinguish things first through feel. And I don't know the process she went through, but there are books written about her which are very interesting. I highly recommend you read The Life of Helen Keller, because she was still alive when I was a kid. She's long dead now. She died when I was young, but she was still alive, and she would give public lectures. She never learned to speak so that you and I could easily understand her. Only the person who had trained her could understand her speech. And she couldn't hear you speaking, but she could understand what you're saying by putting her hand on your throat and feeling the movements in your throat and the vibration. And she could, through feel, she could understand what you were saying. And so the mind is a wonderful thing that if it loses one capacity or two capacities, it has a way of adapting. And so she lost both speech and both the sight and sound, sight and hearing, and yet just through touch, she was able to learn about the world. She traveled later, and as an adult, she traveled all over the world, giving speeches on a variety of subjects. She was a brilliant woman and commented on all aspects of human life and was interested in all aspects of human life, still without being able to see or to hear. But because she compensated by using this sense of touch to open up the field of knowledge. Okay. Oh, so yes, we should stop now. Yes, time for